This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Hey, Drew Dixon here, Chief Content Nerd at Love Thy Nerd. Thanks so much for listening to Humans Gaming. This week you're going to hear something a bit different. It's just me. Chris Gwaltney's not with me on this episode, but what you're going to hear is me walking around Penny Arcade Expo Unplugged, PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In fact, it's the second ever PAX Unplugged. And PAX Unplugged is a new big board gaming convention, and a lot of great new games are there. Some of the best board game designers in the world will show up to this show, and I just thought it would be fun to go and chat with them and hear what they're about and what their games are about, and what they hope people get out of their games, and also, you know, why they make games and why they think board games matter. So I hope this podcast, in some sense, makes a case for why board games are important, why they're worth spending our time, money, and attention on. So that's what this is about. Really hope you dig it. This is part one of at least a two-part series. We may do 3 parts. We had some trouble with some of our audio, so there's just 5 interviews in this one, and we'll release more interviews in the next episode. So you're going to hear from Jonathan Gilmour, who designed one of my favorite games that I played at PAX Unplugged, Dinosaur Island, a great worker placement game that's kind of Jurassic Park themed almost, although of course they don't come out right and say that, but it's about building your own dinosaur park, and it's a blast. You're going to hear from James Ernest with Cheapass Games and the Island of Dr. Lucky. Really fun chat with him. You hear from Liz Roche, who is from Gather Round Games. They made a great storytelling game. Probably the most I laughed at PAX was playing Someone Has Died, a new game from Gather Round Games. It's a really fun storytelling game. You hear from Chris Batarlis of Everything Epic. They did the Big Trouble in Little China game and a bunch of others that they're publishing. And then you also hear from Matt Fantastic, who is part of a collective called Killjoy, where they're just producing some really kind of interesting cutting-edge games, and a lot of games with social messages that I think you'll find interesting. So that's this episode. Really hope you dig it. Be sure to tune in next week for part 2. James Ernest, right?
James Ernest from Cheapass Games, yeah. I live in Seattle.
Cool. And how long have you been making games?
I got into the game industry in 1993, back when Magic the Gathering was brand new.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit about Cheapass Games. You're just telling us a little bit, but yeah.
Cheapass Games started in 96, and my goal was to get a lot of games printed, a lot of games published really quickly. I had a whole bunch of designs. I knew I couldn't sell to anybody else. And so we came up with a Cheapass Games concept, which was stuff I could do on a laser printer, stuff that didn't have spare parts like pawns and dice. It just had the bare minimum components for a game. Kill Dr. Lucky was our very first one. It had a board that you had to tape together yourself, and cards, and the rule sheet, but you also had everyone provide pawns for themselves. And it was a nice starting point for our company, yes.
Yeah, that's cool. And so you've got a new game that we just demoed called The Island of Dr. Lucky. Tell me about that.
In the Island of Dr. Lucky, you're on his mysterious tropical island. Everyone's still trying to kill Dr. Lucky, of course, because everyone hates him for their own nefarious reasons.
He's awful.
He seems to be a pretty awful person. I think all the murderers are delusional. I think he's a great guy, and I think everyone who wants to kill him he's just misunderstood. They're all just crazy people who want to kill him. If you read the cards, there's no way he did all of that. But on the island, there's hazards that are new where the island is trying to kill you. Basically, this is cards that players can throw at each other. And in fact, under the sort of the difficult rules, if I throw a hazard at you and you can't defend yourself, I actually can knock you out of the game.
Yeah.
And that's something that players have been asking for a long time. They want a way to attack each other as well as Dr. Lucky. There's also a black panther named Ragu, who is Dr. Lucky's pet, who goes around the island, and she works the same as the cat in Kill Dr. Lucky, but instead of being people can't see out of the room where she is. Instead of being attractive because she's an adorable little cat, she's distracting because she's a giant Black Panther. Like that's where all your attention goes. Just you can't see out of the room because you're making sure you don't get killed by the cat.
Yeah, and the art style is really unique in this game. It's got a really like classic vibe to it. Where did that come from?
So I think it's partially because I started my game company using a lot of free art. Yeah. All the sort of Victorian clip art that started Dr. Lucky and a lot of the other games gave me a real love for that style. And so I still tend to do games that are, they look like they're 100 years old. I wanted this game to look like it could have been on a shelf in a game store 100 years ago.
Yeah.
There's sort of, this particular one has sort of a 30s, 40s vibe, the sort of classic island adventure era.
Yeah. And so you're telling me that Dr. Lucky is based on a real person that you know. Is this a guy that's like misunderstood as well?
No, so it's sort of backwards. So the idea for the name Kill Dr. Lucky came from me first. I had written a mystery story, recently about a bunch of people who get together and want to kill the old guy and he's not dead yet and they all have a motive. And so the name Kill Dr. Lucky was the very first part of this game. And then we did it with clip art originally.
Yeah.
When I did the new edition of this game a few years ago, we were shooting a video for a Kickstarter, and we were casting about, trying to figure out who could play Dr. Lucky, and my friend BJ Becker was just the perfect choice. So he's our model for all the sort of modern versions of Kill Dr. Lucky.
Just his the way he looks was more.
He's a very dapper dresser. He dresses like Dr. Lucky all the time. He has a very period look, and he's a fantastic actor. If you see our videos with Dr. Lucky in them, he plays the part very well.
Nice, very cool. And if you had to narrow down to one thing that you hope players gain from their time playing your games, what would it be?
I grew up playing games with my family, and I like games where you're there to have fun. So I don't want to spend a lot of time with my head down. I don't want to spend a lot of time with my nose in the rule book. I want to have fun bantering with my friends and really like engaging in the game.
Yeah.
So the games I write are really simple. Once you understand the rules, you can just play them. You have lots of time for chit-chat, and there's lots of role-playing to do. It's all optional. You don't have to be a role player to enjoy Kill Dr. Lucky, but if you understand that your character wants to, actually the character, one of us had the character who's not even here to kill Dr. Lucky, he just wants to kill the cat, but Dr. Lucky's in his way. Everyone's got a little story that they can tell and add to as the game goes on.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of games I like to play.
Yeah, that's cool. And another question I like to ask game designers is, why should people play games? Why should people get around the table and play games?
So it's a good way to get to know people. It's very social, obviously. It's much more social than anything else we do. It engages your brain. It teaches you to think critically. But it also just teaches you to have fun. I was working for a while with educators, and they would say, we don't want to have games in the classroom because our kids are all poor losers. And I said, well, you need to have games because that's one of the things you'll learn how to do. It's like saying, I don't want books in the classroom because my kids are bad readers. You need to put games in front of people so that they know how to lose, so they understand that that's not really what it's about. It's about participating and having fun and doing whatever learning you can do while you're playing the game.
Yeah, that's a really good word because, I have kids and I hear that a lot with parents that I talk to. They're like, well, they get really upset when we play that. And it's like, well, no, you need to learn that.
Learn to not do that.
Yeah,
exactly.
Learning to lose well is a really important life skill. So.
Right, and I think learning not to care so much. I think a lot is placed on winning in it, and everyone publishes a lot of games where there is exactly one winner and a bunch of losers.
Yeah.
That's kind of how gamers like to think. Yeah. But I prefer, and believe me, that's my favorite kind of game too. But I also like games where I can have little victories along the way. Even when you manage to get Dr. Lucky in the right spot with the right weapon and make that colossal murder attempt, even if you don't really win the game, that's still a little victory, and you can enjoy having done that.
Yeah. And I've ran into we were just demoing a game in the first play area, and this guy that we were demoing with, I guess had met you at some point or something, and he told me to ask you about this game. If you don't want this on the podcast, I won't put it on there. So, but I was curious if you could tell me he told me to ask you about Trump 45.
Oh, yes. So this is just a joke at the moment. I've been working on trick-taking games. I've been doing a really deep dive on trick-taking games in the last couple years. And sort of a side product of that, it's not a real game yet, it's just an idea, but it's called Trump 45 because it's a trick-taking game with a 45-card deck. You just take some cards out randomly.
Yeah.
And you play with a 3-card hand to make your hands look huge. And there's just a whole bunch of jokes in this game about our 45th president that are I think every suit is Trump. But one of the suits is even more Trump. It's just, because all I can do is spill off a bunch of jokes about it because it isn't really a game yet.
Right.
But yeah, that's what he's talking about. One day maybe.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, great. Last question. Why do you make games? What drives you to do this?
I think what we talked about earlier, but the goal of playing with my friends and family, of having an engaging thing to do, a social structure that's sort of more fun than just standing around and drinking.
Yeah.
That's why I make games. I grew up playing games, and I think some of my best memories of family and holidays is playing games around that table.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's great. I love checking out Island of Dr. Lucky, and is it available yet?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and people can. Where's the best place for people to find it?
Their favorite local game store, first and foremost. If you can't find it there, our website is cheapass.com.
Great, awesome. Well, thanks so much. And Jonathan, where are you from?
I'm from Northwest Ohio.
Okay, great. And so, tell me a little bit about Dinosaur Island. What makes it unique?
So Dinosaur Island is a medium-weight worker placement game where you're building a dinosaur theme park. I think there's a lot of things that make it unique. One is the smaller micro phases, and each one's trying to be its own different worker placement game. So it makes it very easy to learn, and it flows really well. I'm really proud of the fact that there's no player aids in the game to teach you how to play, because you can just follow the boards around and know what to do.
Yeah.
I also think the theme and the art style is so fantastic. We had Kwanchai do the art, and he's one of the best in the industry, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I love the art, and I love the idea of kind of making your own dinosaur theme park. I think that's something that people relate to. Yeah. Were you like a fan, I assume, of like, the Jurassic Park and that kind of stuff? Was that an inspiration? I'm sure it was.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I read Jurassic Park, the book, and watched the movie as a teenager. I've watched most of the movies. And Brian and I just really wanted to try to bring that experience to life the best way we could.
Yeah. And if you had to narrow it down to one thing, what do you hope players gain from their experience playing Dinosaur Island?
I hope the one thing they gain is a lot of fun. That's always my goal with every game, is that I think the thing that people really enjoy is kind of, collecting the DNA. I think that the dice mechanic is pretty refreshing, and just the fun of like attracting visitors to your park.
Yeah. And
sometimes they get eaten, and that happens.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a big mechanic, is like keeping people. Well, not keeping people from getting eaten, because that's going to happen, but try to keep as few people as getting eaten as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And another question I like to ask designers. A lot of people, like, there's some people who listen to our podcast occasionally that don't get games. They're not into them. Why should people play board games?
I mean, I think people should play board games just because it's mentally stimulating, and it's really good social interaction. That's why I kind of started leaning towards them more with my wife than watching TV and movies.
Yeah, cool. And last question I like to ask designers: why do you make games? What drives you to do this?
I make games because I've always been a creative person. I really wanted to. I was in a very creative, stifling job. And I loved playing board games, so I wanted to try to create them. So, my goal is to always make games that I want to play 100 times. So,
yeah, it's great. And Dinosaur Island has been kickstarted. I've heard you can't really find it anywhere right now, but eventually you will.
There should be another wave of it hitting retail any day now.
Okay, great, awesome. Well, we'll be looking forward to that. And all stores, pretty much all the standards.
Yep, your family little game store or online through our web store, whatever you'd like.
Okay, great, awesome. Well, thanks so much. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah. So Liz, where are you from?
I'm from New York.
And what's your last name?
Roche.
Okay, how do you spell that?
Roche.
Okay. Cool, I just want to make sure. And you are one of the designers of Someone Has Died.
Yes.
And so tell me a little bit about Someone Has Died, what makes it unique.
Someone Has Died is a storytelling game that's set at a will arbitration where someone's died and left behind a fortune, and everyone is trying to convince an estate keeper that they deserve the fortune more than everyone else. Yeah. So it's a improv-based storytelling game with a lot of role-playing and character building.
Yeah. And there's some unique things, like you get a role, and there's elements of your backstory they get at the beginning, but as you're telling your story, people can give you objection cards, right?
Yes.
That sort of can change your story or force you to change gears or tell or tweak your story. Tell me about how that works.
Yeah, the objection cards, so the estate keeper gets to hold on to them and give them out as rewards during the game for good storytelling. So if someone says something that really stands out to the estate keeper, they can award that player an objection card, and that player can hold on to it and at any point during the game play it on someone else. And whatever is on the card is automatically true about whoever it's played on. So it's a really fun way of throwing a wrench in other players' stories, and gives players a lot of wiggle room about what they want to do, and has really makes people think on the spot, because it'll make their story change in an instant.
Yeah, we played it with our group last night, and I was this douchebag Wall Street guy, and so I had this whole persona going, this accent, and I was really dialed into that character. And then someone played an objection card and said I had to talk like I had peanut butter in my mouth, and it totally messed up my game. But it was hilarious and a lot of fun. So what do you hope players get from their time playing Someone Has Died? Like, if you had to narrow down to one thing that you hope players gain from their experience, what would it be?
We want people to tell really silly, fun stories. That's really the ultimate goal, and that as we were designing the game, we wanted to incentivize storytelling as much as possible, and that's why with the objection cards are one of my favorite parts, because they really incentivize people to get really wacky with their stories. Because we have so many people who come up to us after playing a year or more ago saying, I remember when I played with you, I was the poor little orphan who had bad dandruff, and I needed the dermatologist to help me out. So the fact that these stories stick with people is really great for us. And just to get people more into storytelling, and maybe this will get people more into role-playing games. So if someone is too intimidated to sit down and try a role-playing game like D&D or Fate or some of the other ones like that, this could be a good bridge for them.
Yeah, that's great. And why should people? I like to talk to designers about this. Why should people play board games? Why do board games matter? Why do tabletop games matter?
I've always enjoyed board games because of the interactiveness. I've always enjoyed being able to sit down with friends and have something to do and have something. Have a way to interact with friends, and I find that as I'm getting older, the games I like more are the ones that really engage us rather than ones where that are more passive. And I think those really speak to some people, but for me it's always been about having a shared experience with the people at the table. And I think that's always been a really wonderful thing for me.
Yeah, great. And last question I like to ask designers is, why do you make games? What drives you to do this?
I stumbled into it by accident.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
My design partner started making this game for a class in our last semester of college. When we graduated, she started bringing it to game events around New York City. I started out just helping out because she needed extra hands. And it was really cool, and I got jealous. So I joined the team officially, and it's been a really wonderful accident because it's a lovely community. I've learned a lot about games and game design kind of accidentally just by coming to events and meeting other game designers and playtesting games, and it's really lovely, and now I just want to keep doing it.
Yeah, that's great. And what is the game out yet?
It is. It was officially released in September.
Okay, cool. Great. And what's the best place for people to find it?
They can go to someonehasdiedgame.com to purchase it online. We also list on our website the local stores that you can find it at. So you could always go to your local game store and pick it up if they have it.
Cool. Great. Well, thanks so much. It's been great. Yeah. And Chris, what's your last name?
Batarlis.
Okay. How do you spell that?
Batarlis.
Okay, cool. What is the origin of that? Do you know?
It's Greek. My father was born in Greece.
Okay, cool. And what's your role with Everything Epic?
I'm the owner, designer, publisher. I pretty much do it all. Yeah. But I also have amazing designers who work with me as well.
Cool. And you've designed
Secrets of the Lost Tomb, Big Trouble Little China the game, Rambo the board game, and other stuff.
Yeah. Which one are you most proud of?
Everything. Everything Epic.
You don't have a baby that's the one that
Big Trouble Little China, I've been a huge fan of it all my life.
Yeah.
Of course, Secrets of the Lost Tomb was my first game I ever did in my life, so those are some special games.
So are you motivated by some of those cult classic action movies? What?
Yeah. Yeah, it's about nostalgia and growing up with it and loving it as a kid, and loving it as an adult. So, you want to turn it into something that you can reenact and replay, in adulthood.
Yeah, I remember loving that movie when I was pretty young, Big Trouble in Little China, and I always wonder, like, if I went back to it now, if it would still hold up. But I guess you feel like it does, huh?
Oh yeah, it's all in the reflexes.
Yeah. Nice. So tell me about your studio, about Everything Epic. Like, what are you guys about?
We're all about making games that gamers want to play. So we don't just put out quick junk that is just to get cash grabbed quick. It's really about making the most thematic, most epic possible games that we possibly can make. So we do whatever it takes to do that. So as you can see by our games like Big Trouble Little China, they are ultra thematic. They have 90 pages of storybook. I got a full sandbox experience on the front. These games, they're really there to tell the gamer that we respect them, we respect their love for a nostalgia or a genre or a theme, and then we're going to do the biggest and best that we can for it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And if you had to narrow it down to one thing that you hope players gain from their experiences playing your games, what would it be?
I want gamers to basically go ahead and get away from TV and video games and be with their friends, be with their family, be with people they love, play games together in person, and then tell stories about them. I want my games to make those gamers want to walk away and tell people about it. I want them to leave excited, saying, wow, I just did all this crazy thing. I was playing as Jack Burton in Big Trouble Little China, and I did a flip, and I killed all these guys, and then we followed Pan, and he just got us. And, I want them to be things that you're basically being with other people and telling stories. That's really the key.
It sounds like you hope that players walk away as well with a story to tell.
Exactly. Yeah, it should be an experience. Yeah. It's not just playing a game or necessarily trying to see who's going to win, but it's about the experience. It's about the whole thing that you're doing that's really makes your time valuable.
Yeah. And you've got a couple new games as well that you told us about a little bit about before, Grindhouse and Coma Ward. Yep. Tell us about those.
Yeah, Grindhouse is on Kickstarter right now. It's a really fun, super fast-paced, 20 to 30-minute game where you're invited to this crazy mansion, basically, and if you can survive the night, you have a chance to win $10 million. But you have to go through rooms within the Grindhouse, and each room can really hurt you. You can lose limbs, arms, legs. You might even lose your head. And if you do, you'll die and you become a ghost to haunt the other players. Coma Ward, you wake up in a hospital with full amnesia. You don't remember who you are or why you're there, and the hospital is abandoned. And you look around the hospital and you're trying to figure out what's happening, and eventually a phenomenon will trigger. And when it does, that's when you find out who you truly are and what you're really doing there. Yeah. So it's a mature survival horror game, really, for 2 to 6 players, and it has these cool phenomenon sealed boxes that are super thematic. They have their own components, their own mechanics for their entire scenario. Yeah. So it's a little bit like Betrayal House on the Hill, but it's a little bit more for adults. It's very interesting story-wise. It's very thematic.
Okay, nice. And with Coma Ward, tell us about that one.
Yeah, that was Coma Ward.
Oh, that was Coma Ward. I'm sorry.
Right into it.
Oh, so Grindhouse. You transition
limbs, and you're walking through different rooms in this house, and it's super thematic. It's got a narrative to it.
Right.
So you're reading each room and kind of going through it and trying to survive.
Yeah.
And Coma Ward, you wake up in the hospital, and crazy things happen, and you have to try to figure out what's happening, and then a phenomenon will trigger, and that's where all the cool phenomenon sealed boxes come from.
Gotcha now. Yeah, I blended the two together because they were so scary that they sounded both traumatic and
yeah, they're kind of more for adults. They're not really for kids.
Do you because I think like horror is something that a lot like it's a big theme in board games, but it's hard to actually like unsettle players. You know what I mean? Like to actually scare them around a table.
Yep.
Have you guys managed to do that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so when I first played the original demo of Coma Ward, when I was being pitched it, I was sitting in a room that was super loud. It was like the worst possible board game experience ever. Like place to actually pitch a game. Right. But the game was so thematic and so cool while I was playing it, I actually could picture in my mind, the movie in my mind, of walking through this abandoned hospital, having these weird neuroses, having quirks. You could viscerally feel that everything was weird and suspect. And so even though it was the worst like board game environment, the game was epic. So I said I had to make this game. Yeah. And since then, we've developed it, made it even better. It's got tons and tons of content, and it really is for that lover of horror that doesn't just want another zombie game. Right. This is not a game that has zombie apocalypse scenarios. Yeah. This is a game that takes cerebral, weird situations, things that you don't see in board games all the time, and stuff that might be slightly familiar but also unique and new, and puts it into a game that's super thematic and easy to play. And it doesn't take forever to play it. It's under 2 hours, maybe an hour, hour and a half to play the game and you get a full experience and just have a good time.
Yeah, great, cool. Well, last question I like to ask game developers and game designers is, why do you make games? What drives you to do this?
Well, all my life I've been a gamer. Ever since I was a kid. I started in Ice Age and Magic and worked my way up to now. So I started all the way back in the Ice Age, you little kids. I started back in the Ice Age, right? And so I've always loved telling stories and finding ways to basically take all of what I love and try to find ways to relive that element of games and movies and television and all that cool theme that I love, like Indiana Jones and all those stuff. How do you make that into a game where you experience it? And really it's all about telling stories within games. I used to be an English teacher, actually, and I transitioned after I made my first game into games publishing. Because again, I love telling stories, and that's what I want our games to do. Become that experience that's that epic.
Yeah. Well, anything else new that you guys got coming out of the pipes that you'd want to tell us about?
2019 is going to be a huge year for everything epic. We got Rambo the board game, as I said. That's going to be huge, tremendous.
And you worked on that one, right?
Yep, I designed that game. I'm a huge fan of Rambo all my life. So I was like, we got to do this. We had the chance, so we did it. Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
Lots of mowing down people and things like that in the game?
You're definitely taking an M60 and mowing down enemies, but you're also hiding in cover and using tactics. It's actually not a dice game.
Okay.
It is a card-based tactical game. If you like tactical type games, if you like using stealth and interesting mechanics, it's not just about killing enemies.
Yeah.
It's about being smart and finding good ways of doing things. Green Berets and Super Special Forces, they don't miss if they shoot at their target.
Yeah.
Rambo doesn't miss, but he's got to use his actions and do what he has to do in a very smart way in order to truly win. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Secrets of the Lost Station is another huge game that's coming out in 2019. It's a successor to our first game, Secrets of the Lost Tomb, and it's a sci-fi game. It has 100 scenarios and 108 miniatures. It's an epic sci-fi saga. It's a narrative experience. It's a ton of fun. It's very cool. It's its own unique universe, and it's epic. Let's just put it that way.
You're owning your moniker. Everything epic.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, thanks for your time, man. Looking forward to demoing some of these as we have time.
You got it.
Yeah, thanks, man. So, Matt, what's your last name?
Fantastic.
Cool. And where are you from?
I live in New Haven.
Okay, cool. And tell me about what your role with your studio. I forgot the name. The name of it just left me. I blanked.
Yeah, so Killjoy is a new sort of collective of a bunch of people that have other day jobs in the game industry, doing various things. So we can do like kind of passion projects, weirder stuff, things that are a little more out there. Whether it's the theme and art, or has like a explicit social message, or is just exploring what we can do with games as kind of an art form. Can we make games that make you cry? Can we elicit other emotions? Some of it's very pretentious. Some of it's just stupid and fun. My role specifically is I'm one of the founders, and I'm one of the creative directors. So I kind of do a lot of the creative, one of the main people with the vision of what we look like, what the brand is, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's great. That's cool. I think that's interesting because you're seeing some of that, like, we have a lot of video game designers on our podcast as well. In fact, more video game designers on our podcast than board game designers, but I think that's something that you're seeing in the video game space is like games that would try to make you cry, have an elicit an emotional response, or say something meaningful about a social issue. Like I'm thinking like Papers, Please, or That Dragon Cancer or something.
So one of the things actually, so I teach game design at the college level. And primarily digital, work with digital students. I've been in a few different universities and stuff, and I teach theory, right? And so I get to interact with a lot of really interesting digital game stuff, and digital experiences that are exactly like That Dragon Cancer, Papers, Please. Things that are exploring different themes, different emotions. I think video games have been doing this for a really long time. And tabletop in the RPG space, I think like there's incredible stuff going on in that indie artsy scene. But board, card, like kind of the more, I don't even want to say mainstream, but definitely more that space. You don't really see a lot of things that are exploring weirder themes or experiences, or kind of trying to go for an aesthetic. You know, you got people like Nate Hayden doing Cave Evil and Mushroom Eaters and whatever. So you definitely have some people doing some really cool stuff. But, you know, we're excited to be able to kind of work on this stuff. You know, we got a game about survivor's guilt during the sinking of the Titanic. We got a game about us being a bunch of alcoholics in recovery, trying to get alcohol out of our lives, which is sort of a reverse deck builder kind of thing, which is cool.
What is that game called?
That game's called Last Call.
Okay, and y'all have it here at PAX Unplugged, right?
We have a demo version of Last Call. The two games we have at the show that are releasing for the show is And Then We Died, which is a collaborative storytelling game driven by word fragments on tarot cards that you're piecing together to make a story of how we all died together. And then we have Stoner Parking Lot, which is sort of a social game where you are trying to secretly signal partners when you have all the right ingredients for the optimal weed smoking experience in your van.
Right. Yeah. And so, I think that's really cool to me, because there's some new ground it seems like you're trying to break in this. I mean, like you said, there's a few people that are doing it. Like we had Michael Fox, who's working on Holding On.
Michael Fox. Yeah, we've been buds. Him and Rory have been buds for a number of years. And there are other people that. So my main day job is as a freelance game designer and developer. And so I had pitched Rory a game years ago, and he was like, I don't think we can do this, but I really like that you are into doing weird stuff like this, because I'm also into really weird stuff like this. And, you know, Holding On is definitely, the timing is good, because it sort of is blazing a trail with people that know what they're doing. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, like our plan is to do very similar projects. And so when we heard they were doing that, it was great, because they kind of have shown that there is a market, that people are interested, that you can that there's definitely a bunch of people that are into seeing things kind of push the paradigms of what we usually experience in sort of like board and card gaming.
Yeah, that's great. And I don't know if you can speak to this for all of, you know, Killjoy, but I'd be curious from you, is there one, if you could narrow down to one value that you hope players gain from their time with your games, what would it be?
I mean, I think our corest value is just kind of like be cool. We're definitely like a socially driven company, more so than a business driven company, which is a luxury that we have. But in terms of like the overall like kind of design and directional situation, it's really, you know, like make interesting art, whatever that means, you know, create work that is not just it doesn't bring anything. Just it doesn't bring anything, you know, like we can be doing more interesting stuff with the medium of games, so let's do some things that are more intrinsic to that, and, you know, just try to make cool stuff.
Yeah, that's great. And another question I like to ask people, especially designers, why should people play board games? Why should people care about board games?
Because the most human thing is to interact with other humans, and games provide an excellent icebreaker, focal points, thing to center around, so that you can have a lot of the you know, you can have like the realist thing of what being a human is, which is that interaction with people, and games are a great vehicle to make that happen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's such a, like, I don't know, it's such a divided and contentious culture that we live in. We get around the game table, we have to like treat each other as equals, we have to play by the same rules, we have to interact with each other, we learn something about each other. So yeah, I appreciate your perspective there.
It's you know, it's great to just have interactions with people like that.
Yeah, definitely. And last question, why do you make games? What drives you to do this?
Because I can't really not. I just make a lot of stuff. I play in bands, I do art stuff, I just create things, and gaming is my favorite thing, I guess. So making games is a natural thing for me to just start doing. Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed checking out your games the other day. We played And Then We Died, that's what it's called, right? Yep. And then we played Stoner Parking Lot, and people don't know this as I'm talking to you, but you've got a great outfit going on here, dressed up as a cool nun, I guess. How would you describe it?
A sexy nun, I suppose.
A sexy nun.
It's Sunday Nun Day, you know. You gotta come in and repent for the other nights of this convention.
Yeah, so so definitely check out Killjoy's games. I would say some of the most unique games I've seen here at PAX Unplugged, and definitely ones that are going in some really interesting directions, which I really appreciate, and I think our listeners will too. So thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, the website is joyisdead.com.
Okay,
and
great.
it's Killjoy.
And that's the best place to find your games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. And people can follow you guys on Twitter too, or anywhere else?
No, we're on Instagram.
Okay, Instagram.
Killjoy is dead.
Okay, great, awesome. Thanks, man. So that's it for this episode of Humans of Gaming. Thanks again for listening. Be sure to check out our other great podcasts, Free Play and The Pull List, our new comic book podcast. Go check out the website, lovethynerd.com. Go follow us on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Search for our Facebook community. It's just search for Love Thy Nerd Community on Facebook and you'll find it, and request to join. And you can come hang out and talk to and chat with a bunch of other really cool nerds. Thanks again for listening to this podcast. We'll be back again next week with some more board game designer interviews, part 2 of our PAX Unplugged series. So we'll see you next time. Thanks.